So when we get started on this walk through time here of my time working overseas, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. We're going to talk about my mission, what I kind of thought what the mission was. What's God's mission, but what was the CIA mission? But before we do that, I just want to say this is one of my favorite pictures. And this was taken in the Philippines in Manila. Again, a young Chris Hager. And it says, "Bataan has fallen, but the spirit that made it stand, a beacon to all the liberty-loving peoples of the world, cannot fail." And that is the truth. And the world knows that to be the truth. That we represented liberty for all the liberty-loving peoples of the world. And you see that everywhere you go into the world. And everybody wants to come here for good reason. Because we have that liberty. We have freedoms that we're guaranteed. We have a government that doesn't try to keep us down, not let us vote. We have a system of an economy that works through capitalism that lets us grow as much as we want to grow. We have a Christian beliefs that this country were founded on that's helped us throughout our beginnings to overcome evil. And so I just want everyone to know that when you travel around the world, everyone sees us as that beacon. And I want us to remember and be proud of being that beacon for all the liberty-loving people of the world. So let's talk a little bit about the mission. So we're going to talk about a couple of things here. I'm going to talk about the mission, which I got a little fuzzy on the mission. I'll be the first one to admit it. Between the CIA mission and God's mission. We'll talk about the enemy, and the enemy really gets confusing. We'll talk about weapons that we can use in this battle of CIA versus God. We'll talk about some battle plans. Once we decide what weapons are we going to use, what battle plans. Then we're going to kind of look at terrorist method of operation, because that's what I used to teach around the world, and it'll make sense to you when I get there. And then I'm going to leave you with one practical thing that I want you to keep in your mind for the rest of your life that's supposed to keep you alive, that we talk to counterterrorism teams around the world, and it saved my life many times, and it's just a little practical application of all these things that I want to share with you. So as we look here, the CIA mission, and this is according to the CIA World Factbook. Preempt threats and further U.S. national security objectives by collecting intelligence that matters, producing objective all-source analysis, conducting effective covert action as directed by the President, and safeguarding secrets to help keep our nation safe. The United States and the CIA is the best intelligence organization in the world. We do better than anybody. We've saved more people than anybody. We've saved our country more than anybody. We haven't saved the world, though. And as you look back, it never really says I'm going to save the world, although I thought we could save the world. If we can do democracy, capitalism, truth, Christianity, we can save the world, but it just says keep our nation safe. We did a great job of keeping our nation safe. However, of all those countries that I told you I've been to, whether it's in South America, Central America, Middle East, Yemen, Sudan, Africa, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen, all these places, there's not one place I've been that's any better off now. It's still the same. everybody they're still trying to kill each other for whatever reason, or kill us, or we're trying to kill them, or they're trying to kill their neighbors, or they're trying to kill their tribal people. But the CIA mission was not really to save the world. I thought it was to save the world, but it just says keep our nation safe. We did that. I feel good about that. I just thought I could save the world. And so I was a little confused on the mission. Now, it's interesting. The CIA mission, when you read that mission statement, you go, boy, that was a bunch of stuff. You know, covert operations, and they're gathering all this intelligence with satellites, and we got balloons floating everywhere. Now, you know, we're flying a U-2 spy plane around that balloon that they shot out of the sky just recently. So you say the government world, the CIA world, the mission is super complicated. But God has a very simple mission. God says in John 3:16 through 17, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." Very specific. Save the world through him. So we know if we look at CIA versus God, well, one's saying let's make the nation safe, the other one's saying let's save the world. So that's what we're trying to do. How do you save the world? And then God was very clear with the Great Commission, which is Matthew 28:19 through 20, where he basically said, as he was ascending into heaven, you know, you would think he would kind of give you some good last words there. I'm leaving, and so I'm going to give you some good last words. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." Pretty simple. I want everybody to know about Christianity, and I want you to go tell them. And we got to save everybody we can before we get to the end and we don't have any more chance to do it. I want you to do it before I come again. And it basically tells you the only way you can do that is you got to kind of start in your little neighborhood. And the first person you have to save is yourself. You have to make the decision that you're going to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. And if you haven't done that, then you need to go talk to your pastor about how you do that, because that's the most important part. That's the very beginning of this CIA versus God. How do you save the world? You got to save yourself first. And God's telling you how to do it. He gives you a simple plan. And then after you save yourself, then you got to save your family. You know, you can't just not take your kids to church because you have all these other things that you need to do. You have to keep this thing moving forward so that we all understand what the basic mission is to save the world. But it doesn't do you any good if you just save yourself and go, okay, I'm going to go to church now occasionally. You know, but my kids can't go because they're so busy with soccer or football, or I can't go do that. I got to go to the softball game. I got to go to the soccer game. My kids don't have to go to school. You got to save your family. After you save your family, you got to go knock on a few more little doors here in this little neighborhood, because you just want to tell everybody we can so that we can let everybody know, hey, there are some absolute truths that you need to know that can help you in this world. The plan for saving yourself, saving the world is in the Bible. It's all here. So we just have to make sure everybody understands that plan. And then it is go save all the nations. We want to spread this around the world. Tell everyone is what Jesus said. So that's God's simple mission versus the agency's somewhat complicated mission. And so now I want to transition to, who is the enemy? And this is another one where I wish I could tell you that it's so easy, but it's not. I thought it was easy. You heard me tell you about President Mobutu in Zaire. President Mobutu was supported by the American people forever because he was helping us to overthrow communist governments in his area. There was always like a big civil war with Angola. And obviously, he's helping, and so we help him. But in reality, he was a dictator. He took a lot of our stuff, a lot of our money, stole our money. And it's just like everybody else we support, to be quite honest with you, is everybody we give money to, all these countries that we give support to, unfortunately, when you look back on those countries, nobody's any better off. Did we stop some things from happening that could have caused us some issue not to be safe in the United States? Yes. Did we overthrow the Soviet Union, which was a severe threat to our safety? Yes. Did we save the world? No, because the Soviet Union, they don't believe in God to begin with. China doesn't believe in God to begin with. They're never going to respect us because they have no moral code. So it's difficult. In the long term, Mobutu, not the best guy to be around. You go to the Philippines, and you had the Marcos family, give them tons of money. They had communists kidnapping Americans in the South, the Moros. They had the New People's Army, the communists, assassinating 500 of their own military officers and police and government officials in Manila, on an average year. They killed my friend Nick Rowe, who was a Department of Defense service member who was unfortunately assassinated by the New People's Army. I spent a lot of time in the Philippines. I love the Philippines. As a counterterrorism person, you could go there. You're fighting the communists. You're fighting the Moros. The Islamic rebellion in the South. You're fighting poverty. You think you're supporting democracy. You think you're helping the people. But in the end, it's still the same. I got caught in a coup there one time. Unfortunately, when the government, again, we go back to that tribal thing. I had one part of the military fighting the other part of the military. And I come out one day, and then all of a sudden, I look around, and they got my hotel surrounded. They got little blue bands, and I'm going, this is not good, because this is what happens every time. And I was lucky to get out of my hotel. Went to the embassy, and we realized the coup had started. And they actually encircled our hotel and held a lot of people hostage there for the entire time, several weeks. And probably one of the weirdest things I've ever seen was, I'm there in the embassy and we're looking out, and all of a sudden we see this little plane come flying over. It was like a little trainer. And I don't remember the exact designation, but the open canopy type trainer, 2 seats. And it's flying over, and all of a sudden we see it go, and then it goes up, and we hear a boom. And I realize that trainer just bombed the presidential compound. And here came another one. Boom. And you're going, I'm back in World War II. I'm looking across, in the Philippines. I got these little trainers carrying single bombs. And the thing got out of hand, and eventually it's well documented that the United States decided they were going to close down the airspace, and so they sent some F-16s out across there and said, hey, the airspace is closed, guys. Can you imagine this guy flying this little propeller trainer? Here comes this big F-16 going, hey, it's closed. All right, it is closed. And so, who's the enemy? I can't figure it out. And then Osama bin Laden. We all heard of him. We all know who he is. The dude was on our side to begin with. He's on our side when I was in Pakistan, Afghanistan. He was trying to overthrow the Soviets. You just can't figure out who your friends are. And half the time your friends really are your foes. And even the foes who become friends are only for a short period of time. But that is not true. That is not true when you get to God's enemy. God's enemy is clearly defined. We know a lot about him. And if you go to Ephesians 6:12, it says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood. See, I always thought it was flesh and blood. I have to admit, I did think we could somehow convince them that what they should do, to save their people or to save themselves. But in the end, it's not against flesh and blood. But it's against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers. Boy, that all sounds good. I thought that's who I was kind of fighting against, all rulers, powers, Soviet Union, rulers, powers, Contras down in Nicaragua. But then it says against the powers of this dark world and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. It's not about everything going on here doing battle, although we love to do battle here on earth. But actually, the real foe is that spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And when I traveled to South Africa one time on business, and for the government and for Ford, I've been there a lot, really, actually. But I took a side trip, took a little safari. This is a picture of a lion I actually took when I was on safari, and this is me sitting right here, and you see the lion there just kind of hanging out here. They're just sitting there. The lion is the only animal that sleeps on the ground in the jungle because he knows nobody's going to mess with him. And he's just taking it easy here. Because one, after they eat, they go, hey, I got nothing else to do right now until the next time I want to go disrupt something. But 1 Peter 5:8-9 says this about the lion. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, clearly defined. The devil, clearly defined, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. He's just hanging out. And he's not worried. Just like this guy. He's not worried because he thinks he's in charge. Because we let him think he's in charge. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers, which is us, Christians, family of believers, throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of suffering. We're always going to suffer. It took me a long time to figure that one out too. We'll talk a little later here when we get to the purpose, about what your purpose is and where you're at. But I kept always hearing this term, that we're foreigners in this land. And I go, I'm not a foreigner in this land. But it took me a long, long time to figure out, I really am a foreigner in this land. And I go, darn, how did that happen? How did I become a foreigner in my own land? But we'll talk about that a little later. very defined foe when it comes to, what our enemies are. So I'm going to spend a little time now talking about the battle plan, God's plan and our plan. But before I do, I just want to tell you, one more story when we saw Mobutu there about friend or foe. And I didn't tell this story for a long, long time. When I go to Africa for the first time, this book says, CIA veil, that Mr. Casey went to visit Mobutu a lot. And it says that we trained counter-terror teams there, and we trained presidential details there. And I spent a lot of time in Zaire. So first time I go to Zaire is first time to Africa. As we were flying over there, a person on the plane there, is only a small group of us on the plane with Mr. Casey. And that person tells me, it was a secretary, and she goes, Chris, be careful when you get there, because last time we were staying in the presidential palace, and I went to go into the bathroom, and there was a snake in my toilet. And so she tells me this story about how this snake was in her toilet. And now that little seed has been planted. And so when we land on the ground, we are busy, very busy that day. We're literally off the plane. We go for 15 hours or so. We're visiting all these different people. There's a big war going on in Angola. The communists are trying to take over. Mobutu, it's all in the book. Mobutu in Zaire is trying to, funnel all this money into rebels that are fighting the people in Angola. A lot going on. They take my bag and they take it to the Intercontinental Hotel. You remember me telling you I get $320 a day? Well, this is why I'm staying there at this time, because I'm with the boss. And when they take our bags, because we went off, and they took my bag, and the little stands they have, and they opened up my bag in the hotel room, and they opened up the bag, and they did that because they wanted to see what's in our bags, not because it was good service, but they'll tell you it was good service. So I've been working all day. We have about 30 minutes to come inside, change clothes. Then we have to go to a party at the embassy. I come running in, and I've got on a white shirt because we had some very high-level meetings, and a tie. I'll rip it off. The tie, I've been sweating so much, literally sweat is just soaked up in that tie. Shirt is all dirty because a lot of the vehicles are open, and now you're driving on roads that are dirt, so now you got dust over everything. And I take off my shirt. And when I took off my shirt, I just kind of unbuttoned everything. And then I took my gun, and I laid my gun over here. And on the dresser, that's the key point. I take off a t-shirt that I had on. I reach in my suitcase. I just reach right over. I pull out a t-shirt. I pull the t-shirt over my head. And now this next part of my story takes like milliseconds to tell, but it seemed like a lifetime. And when I pull that white t-shirt over my head, I feel something dangling on my arm from about here to down to here, and you know what it is. And I'm thinking, there's the snake. Now this is milliseconds. But there's the snake. It somehow now got into my bag. It's hanging down my arm. I feel it just shimmering just a little bit. And I look at the corner of my eye, and I see this black thing hanging from all the way down here. It's about that wide, all the way down to my hand. So my first thought was not a logical thought, and that was grab my gun and shoot it. Which luckily, the gun was far enough away that I couldn't do that. And I would hope that I would have ruled that out to begin with. So my next thought was, hey, you're going to have to just smack this thing, stun it, kill it, and then move as fast as you can, but be efficient. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I can do this. So I'm sitting here, I'm just going to smack it, throw it down on the ground, stomp on it. I look, there he is. I see it. Whack. I smack that thing as hard as I can. I grab it and I go straight down my arm. And when I did, I hit the edge of my watch, which is really sharp, and I start to bleed. But I throw it down, and then I stomp that snake. Oh, I stomp you. And I'm looking at it, and I'm going, that's not a snake. That is just a knit sock, and it was static electricity making it shimmering on my arm. And so I almost shot myself over a knit sock. But it's because she had put it in my mind that snake was going to be there. So it also shows you how easy you can be influenced by people to accept things that make no sense because people are telling you stories that give you some influence. So I do want to stop kind of there, and we'll go into the CIA battle plan. But to remember that sometimes friends and foes are hard to define. Our foe with the devil, easy to define. And don't let people influence you with their ideas and then you make bad decisions.